So we're going to talk about lactate with this video, and this is an interesting lecture for a variety of reasons. One, you're going to learn some things, or you're going to find out that some things you've been taught are incorrect. And that's always fun, and that's always interesting, and some people will really hold on to what they've been taught. And that's okay, but make sure that you at least give what I tell you on the exam. Okay, and this is actually kind of funny because I ran into a student that I had last semester, and she went off on lactate and lactic acid. She was being funny, and she kind of knows my thoughts on it. So if any of you know Chloe, and that's all I'll leave it at, just tell her that I mentioned her in this video. Having said that, here are the 4 objectives for lactate. Okay, now we're going to start by talking about pyruvate. Now, pyruvate is what we normally form at the end of glycolysis. However, sometimes we don't have enough oxygen to match what is needed for the electron transport chain. If you recall, oxygen is needed for the electron transport chain because it accepts electrons, and it ultimately combines with water or combines with hydrogen to form water. Well, if we don't have enough oxygen, that changes things. And so if we end up with lots of pyruvate, lots of NADH, well, then we've got a lot of hydrogen ions floating around, okay? And that's not ideal because hydrogen ions are acidic, right? pH is actually a measure of hydrogen ion concentration. Another thing that can cause us to go from pyruvate to lactate, remember, we have lactate, or lactate is formed if we don't have oxygen or enough oxygen, is an enzyme called lactate dehydrogenase, LDH. Now, you've got fast twitch and slow twitch, which you should all be aware of, and we're going to go into a little more detail later on in the semester. But fast twitch fibers have a type of enzyme, a type of LDH, that really promotes the formation of lactate. Okay? So don't get scared when you see the word biochemistry here. It's not that frightening. Now, we produce NADH during glycolysis. We've talked about this. Now, we want to convert this back to NAD so that we can keep forming ATP, right? This is a cycle. It's constantly going, but we need all the products. And so if we have NADH and not NAD, then we can't go through this process because we're moving hydrogen ions, that sort of thing. All right, and so we need somewhere for these hydrogen ions to go. Now, if we've got oxygen, the mitochondria will take the oxygen that's in it, pick up a hydrogen ion, and hey, voila, we've got water. Yay, that's great. But if we don't have enough oxygen, pyruvate goes, yo, I can take one of those hydrogen ions. And now what we've got is lactate. So basically, pyruvate plus a hydrogen ion is lactate. Okay. I also want you to pay attention to the fact that I do not use the word lactic acid. Okay, it's lactate, and they're completely different. There is a thing called lactic acid. The problem is humans don't produce it. Okay, let me repeat that. Humans do not produce lactic acid. It's not a thing. All right, and so you're going, wait a minute, textbook talks about lactic acid, and it kind of addresses that it's like, it's not really a thing, but we're going to keep using this incorrect term, which is a little frustrating, but it is what it is, okay? So we don't make lactic acid when we exercise, okay? Like it says here, and this is from a guy named Dr. Robergs. I think it's Robert Robergs. He worked at the University of New Mexico. The belief that lactate production releases a proton, which is a hydrogen ion, and causes acidosis, that we refer to as lactic acidosis, is a construct. It's made up. It doesn't exist, and as such needs to be corrected. Further, this is one of the greatest controversies in modern exercise physiology, and it's one of the most entrenched constructs among scientists and laypersons. Okay? We don't produce lactic acid. Lactic acid doesn't cause soreness. Lactic acid doesn't cause you to fatigue. Lactate doesn't do any of those things either, but that's a thing that many, many, many people believe. And so one of my goals with this class is to get that, to kind of get that out of your head. Okay, so what do we know about lactate? Well, lactate reduces hydrogen ion concentration. What does it do? It takes that hydrogen ion that's floating around, pyruvate does, and we form lactate. This is good. That reduces the acidity inside of the cell. So it's what we call a buffer. Okay? In the muscle, we have what's called a symporter, and that means in order for something to leave, we actually have multiple things leaving. And so in order for lactate to leave, it needs to come out with a hydrogen ion. So as lactate leaves the cell and goes into the bloodstream, hydrogen ion also leaves. And so as the concentration of lactate goes up, so does hydrogen ion. Okay, and so this is what we call a correlation, but correlation does not imply causation. In other words, high lactate is not what's causing the acidity. High acidity is not necessarily what's causing the high lactate. Okay, they just both happen to go up at the same time. And so to help you understand correlation and causation, we've just got this little figure here, right? So if it's hot, that's going to cause sunburn. If it's hot, that's going to cause you to eat more ice cream. But just because you create more ice cream doesn't mean you're going to get sunburned, although there will be a correlation between these two, okay? Because if people eat lots of ice cream when it's sunny, people get sunburned when it's sunny, okay? And so there will be a linear relationship between those two things, but that doesn't mean that eating ice cream causes sunburn or sunburn causes you to eat ice cream, okay? So it's important to know that lactate formation does not result in hydrogen ion production. So what happens to lactate? Well, what happens when production exceeds removal? So we're producing more than we're getting rid of. What happens is delivery of oxygen to the muscle is less than what we need for our whatever it is we're doing. Okay, so as a result, we increase glycolysis, we recruit those fast twitch fibers, we're going to produce more lactate because there's not enough oxygen to do what we need to do. And we can't clear it out because we're producing more, okay? But again, just because we have lots of lactate does not mean that's what's causing us to be tired, and it's not what's causing us to be sore. It's just correlated. Lactate is good, okay? So I've said this a couple times. So if we want to produce as much ATP as possible from glycolysis, we need lactate because we need NADH to be broken back down, and we need those hydrogen ions to go somewhere, okay? Lactate takes care of that hydrogen ion. It buffers acid, which means it reduces the acidity. It doesn't produce the acidity. And it helps reduce the acidity within the muscle cell because it helps get hydrogen ion out, okay? Another reason why it's good, we can use it for other things, okay? We can use lactate to produce ATP. We can use lactate really to produce glucose, which we can use to produce ATP. We do something called the Cori cycle, which I'll show you here in just a second. And so this allows us to continue producing ATP. And so this is what we're going to end with here, just this little figure. And we'll talk more about it in class. Okay, but we've got the exercising muscle. We produce some pyruvate that's turned into lactate because we've got low oxygen availability. That lactate is then taken into the bloodstream. It makes it to the liver. And then in the liver, we convert these lactate into pyruvate. It costs us 6 ATP, but we can produce pyruvate, or pyruvate can be converted into glucose. Okay, and then glucose can go into glycolysis, that sort of thing, and we can go through this whole cycle, right? Now, especially if oxygen's available, it might cost us an extra 6, but we're still able, if it goes through the electron transport chain, we're still producing about 30 ATP. Okay, so in a pinch, lactate's a really, really good thing. It can provide us some energy. So lactate, not a bad thing. Lactic acid, not a human thing. Okay, lactate doesn't cause soreness, doesn't cause fatigue, doesn't cause tiredness. Okay, it might be linked with those things, but that's not what's causing it.